Here are my students, including some ex-students, because I informed my ex-students and some colleagues that we are arranging such sessions for this course. So some other colleagues in the rest of the presentation may also join us to listen to you, dear Jarret. It's my pleasure to welcome you once again here in this course. Thanks a lot for accepting our invitation and for being here with us today. Let me move forward to our outline, what we are supposed to be doing today. I will briefly introduce dear Jarret to you, and then we will talk about, we will remind what we discussed about the definition of plagiarism and related with categorization by taking students' intentions into consideration. Because we are going to relate these intentions with some pedagogical approaches which will help us identify the role of instructors in teaching writing. And then we will consider several other factors having influence on our approaches towards both teaching writing and assessing writing. I'd like to especially focus on feedback exchange, either peer feedback or teacher feedback here, and especially considering Jarret's experience in testing. We would like to focus more on testing aspect with Jarret because he's quite experienced in this. Let me briefly introduce you Jarret. He's an academic, but he also has industry experience, 5 years of industry experience as an testing center administrator. Within this perspective, he worked with local, state, and national agencies to develop policies for test delivery and the mitigation of test fraud. These are important terminologies: test fraud and test delivery, and developing policies regarding these issues. I guess these are still hot topics for because we also suffered a lot from test fraud. His recent research has focused on student behaviors and beliefs, on cheating and strategies that can positively influence academic integrity in higher education. Of course, we imply that we prioritize here that academic integrity promotion, not the promotion of cheating behavior. These are avoiding strategies in terms of promoting academic integrity. Indeed, you are already familiar with the facilities of the activities of National College Testing Association. Jarret was the past president of this association, and since 2014, he has been acting as the member of executive committee. He's the co-chair of Academic Integrity Committee at his College of DuPage. I hope I am pronouncing it correctly.
Perfect.
College and faculty for the last 20 years, again, at the College of DuPage. Welcome again, Jarret. It's great to see you here in this session. And I'm sure my students and my colleagues will find it quite useful to talk to you, especially in these unprecedented times regarding the rise of academic misconduct due to pandemic. Okay. I'd like to move forward, if you like. Let's remember the definition of plagiarism. As you already remember, we talked about plagiarism and we referred to the definition by Teddy Fishman. And last week we reminded this definition. We discussed this definition once again with Tomasz Foltenek, and he also expanded our understanding of plagiarism a bit more by going the boundaries of Teddy's definition. Here, what we mean by plagiarism, using words, ideas, or any work products. Anything that is attributable to another identifiable person without attributing, without citing, without informing your readers, audience that you borrowed this information from somewhere else in order to gain some credit. Okay, this our consensus on our understanding of plagiarism. And what about the title of this course? How we place plagiarism in our academic integrity policies. When we examine the policies, we see that they generally the issue from three perspectives. Some of the policies, for example, focus on detection of academic misconduct, detection of plagiarism. For example, in Turkey, Higher Education Council, they are providing some guidelines regarding academic misconduct, and their approach is related to detection, is limited with the detection of academic misconduct, detection of plagiarism. And then we see that some other approaches focus on reaction, reactives. Okay, we detect academic misconduct, so what shall we do? There comes sanctions. Okay, what shall we do? Shall we ask to complete the assignment, or shall we expel the student? So there is a range band of sanctions available. Or some other policies, very limited policies, aim for the prevention of academic misconduct. What does it mean? It means that they try to benefit from some pedagogical approaches by the help of pedagogy, from misconduct to integrity promotion. As considering the role of our department, English language teaching department, we are more familiar with a preventive approach. So in our policies, in addition to detect and react against misconduct, we will also prioritize preventive approaches. So this will be our understanding. Considering our definition, we said that, okay, without attributing credit to the original source. Considering or remembering this definition, it will be good for us to check the reasons behind plagiarism. Previously, I conducted some studies to understand the reasons of my students, why they plagiarize. So considering these reasons and checking the relevant literature, it is possible to say that some students accidentally plagiarize, whereas some others, first of all, I'm sure you are familiar with text writing. So it is a weak paraphrasing skill proposed by Howard.
Hocam, can I interrupt, please? I'm very sorry, but we have problems hearing you. I don't know why this is happening, but the quality of the sound is very bad today for some odd reason.
Let me try this. Maybe it becomes better. Maybe it's because of the internet here. Okay. How is it now?
It's much better. Thank you.
It is better, then I'll be wearing this. Okay then. So we were talking about accidental and intentional plagiarism, and here page writing. What happens in page writing? Students aim to paraphrase, but because of their lack of proficiency, let's say, for example, in the target language, they cannot do this. They follow some single slot substitutions or multiple slot substitutions. They just change a few words in the paraphrase expression, which will be quite similar to the original one. This is what we understand from weak paraphrasing skills. So this could be considered as accidental plagiarism. However, think about, for example, contract cheating. When you deliver the assignment, the student finds an essay mill and asks someone else to write the essay by paying him. Or finds another student, think about collision, ask the student to write an essay. So collision and contract cheating, to my understanding, should be regarded as intentional plagiarism because this is nothing related to directly related to only lack of proficiency in the target language or lack of academic writing skills. So here behavior is important as well. But when we check the relevant literature, for example, the study by Honorary indicates that even intentional plagiarizers throughout the time, they change their behaviors. So remembering the previous discussion with regards to academic integrity policies, it shows the impact of pedagogical approach, taking a pedagogical approach towards academic integrity rather than reaction, rather than deduction, because there will be opportunity for any student to become a promoter of academic integrity. This is the point that we should take into consideration here. Remember, when we are talking about pedagogical approaches, we need to take some other factors into consideration. For example, asking someone to write in L1, this is the first language, mother tongue, is not same asking someone to write in a foreign language or in a second language. So, Jarret, here we in Turkey, we consider Turkish as the mother tongue, as L1, and English as the foreign language. The situation is a little bit different in the United States because some students speak English as their second language. Consider, for example, the student whose mother tongue is Spanish or any other language. So second language and first language, the discrimination between first language and second language will be more related concern for you in the United States, whereas the differences between first language and foreign language will be another concern here for us in Turkey. And some other factors also, such as, for example, socio-cultural differences also might have an impact. Before we start today, for example, Jarret asked me, Salim, how shall I address you during this session? Shall I tell you, Salim, or shall I call you dear professor? So this is a socio-cultural difference. I mean, how we maintain our communication with the other people, with our colleagues, with our students, and how is it reflected in student assignments. So even in daily life instances, we see that it has an impact on many aspects. So unavoidably, it will be affecting also our academic writing styles. Of course, when we talk about pedagogical approaches, again, before we start today, I talked to Jarret and said that, okay, we believe that plagiarism is increasing because of technology, So we blame technology because it is increasing or promoting students maybe to act in an honest way. So, but on the other hand, we should remember that technology is also providing digital tools for us, such as citation managers, Stavi and Note Mendeley. They are all good opportunities for students to manage their citations. The students, you will be writing your PhD thesis, and writing a PhD thesis is a very challenging task, and which will take several years. So it will be to your advantage to benefit from citation managers, because they will not only be writing citations, reference entries for you, but they will also help you organize your notes, because when you are making academic readings, you need to take notes, you need to underline, you need to highlight something. So all these tools will help you to understand discussions that are coming from different perspectives in a better way. Also, when we talk about paraphrasing skills, this will require finding some synonyms, so we can encourage students to benefit from corpuses. For example, I find word and phrase .info a very useful web page in terms of finding synonyms, because students will be able to see the relevant expressions in real sentences that are borrowed from corpuses. So it's great. Or when we talk about readability of the text, students again here calculate readability. Flash reading is, Flash can say grade levels, smoke or fog rates by using even Microsoft Word or Hemingway editor. Or we are more aware with the facilities of text matching software. We can use text matching software not only to detect plagiarism, but also to prevent it. However, it doesn't automatically happen. This is what I reveal with the help of my research. We need a very carefully planned pedagogical approach here. But when it comes to text matching software, I will have a reminder word here. As T-Stop under INAI, we conducted research and revealed that some so-called plagiarism detectors, they call themselves as plagiarism detectors on the internet, and they claim that, again, they provide so-called plagiarism reports for student assignments. So they encourage students to submit their assignments through their text matching software available freely on the internet, and then they give the guarantee to the students that it is plagiarism free, and then they can submit it to the teachers. However, some essay mills and some of these text matching software companies are cooperating with essay mills and encouraging students, directing students to essay mills. So we need to be very careful about this. And also, when it comes to administrators or lecturers, we need to be very we need to be knowledgeable about the capabilities of text matching software. We assume that, okay, we are using Turnitin here in our institution, so we solve the problem of plagiarism. No, it doesn't happen in this way. There are capabilities. There are some drawbacks and failures of these systems, so we need to be knowledgeable about them. Now I'm moving towards teaching writing. Before I move to teaching writing, dear Jarret, would you like to add anything at this point or later? Let me ask you, please.
Um, uh, Actually, yeah, I do. Thank you. Thank you for taking a quick pause there. And again, I do want to say thank you for all of you for joining what is late for me and nice and early for you. I see the sun coming in from some windows over there. But one thing that you made a comment on that I just wanted to add it up to. Technology is fascinating. Technology has been able to provide us with so many new things. It's also providing new tools for which students are accessing and these tools to plagiarize. And in many ways, it's opening up, but it's also creating these very interesting generational expectations that I think we also need to address. And I know Dr. Zenith Khan was on, was it last week or the week before?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, excellent.
Yeah, he was with us 2 weeks ago.
One thing that she had mentioned that really was an eye-opening point for me, looking at, even as we're right out of university beginning to teach, that there's such a generational gap every couple of years now, that we really need to tie in to understand how those differences are, what technology has changed each different generation, and their in the impact of that technology and what they believe is plagiarism and what it is not. And I remember her sharing her daughter was working on a diorama for school, so a presentation where they had to cut out and create things. And throughout the night, she had shared that it was clear that the school's expectations were far above and beyond what I believe her daughter was 7 or 8 years old at the time. So she worked as much as her daughter did. And then at the end of the project, her daughter was required to put her name on it. And she looked at her daughter and she said, well, did you do the entire project? And even at 6 or 7, there was this little struggle in her daughter's eyes to say, well, but it was my work, Mommy. I said, well, no, this is where it starts. This was a collaboration between you and I, and we will both put our names on this body of work to reinforce the importance that as we continue as a society with all of these different projects, the different technology, where these lines become very blurred, it's very important for us to go back. And I think that particular situation really hits the nail on the head, that we must encourage all of our students to recognize when there's any collaboration, recognize at any given time the importance of that moment of having the mother and the daughter both sign for something that'd be a first or second grade project, because there was more than one person working on that time. So technology is great, but we're going to continue to see that impact significantly, and the expectations of generations are just changing rapidly. So I'll add the rest of my comments as we continue.
Okay, thank you, Jarret, calling our attention to the difference between collision and collaboration. This is very important. Maybe as teachers, in our course contents, we should talk about this policy and inform our students about this, because 2 days ago I received an email from one of my students. Throughout my lecture, I encourage my students, my BA students, to exchange peer feedback. So they provide peer feedback to each other. My student asked me whether it would be appropriate to ask someone else to proofread his paper before submission. So I told him that you will already be exchanging peer feedback. So additional contribution that is coming from someone else out of the class, it wouldn't be appropriate. But it was good for my student asking this question. But I thought that, okay, I need to inform this to all my students. So for next semester, I will revise my policy and provide more detailed explanation and informing them with much clear explanations to draw the clear line between collision and cooperation. Thank you, Jarret. Okay, I'm moving forward to teaching writing. Dear Jarret, I already shared some useful sources with my students, and just before we start this session, I shared an article, your recent article with my students, and we will be talking about your article, which is related to testing and academic integrity through the end of this session. But here, especially, I'd like to inform all my students that there are very good sources available that can help us understand the principles behind teaching academic writing, especially teaching academic writing. And there are many good sources, especially available for international students, because international students, the way of teaching international students might be different, considering language proficiency, considering the differences between L1 and L2, and also foreign language. These affect the methodology of teaching writing. Therefore, I strongly recommend these books to my students. Of course, it's not possible to read them in one day, but they should at least check table of contents very carefully, and when they need specific topics related to these issues, then they can go back and read the relevant chapters from these books. They will be quite helpful. Okay, regarding teaching writing, I guess we should remember the difference between product approach and process approach. Previously, as instructors, we gave more priority to product approach because we were mainly under the impact of behaviorism. So we expected our students to mimic a model. We provided a model text. Okay, here is the model. So you will be using this model to form your own text. However, later we see a shift from product approach to process approach. What happens in the process approach? We now give more priority to the generation of ideas. Therefore, we encourage our students to submit several drafts, and then we give the opportunity of feedback. Where does feedback come from? Okay, the feedback might be coming from teachers, feedback might be coming from peers, or it could be self-feedback. I mean, the student, in considering the development of metacognitive skills or self-regulation skills, the student, by taking the instructions into consideration, might be revising his or her own assignment. Here we are talking about scaffolding and exchange of ideas. However, there will be several things to consider here when it comes to process approach. In 2017, I attended a conference, symposium on second language writing, and Hemplians had a plenary speech there and warned all the delegates that process writing approach may not work properly if not planned and implemented carefully. So what do we understand from careful implementation or careful planning? Here, this is what I consider here, the important things that we should consider. For example, topic. What is the topic if you are assigning a written assignment, a written task for your students? What is the topic? Do you assign the topic as the lecturer, or will they choose any topic? This is important. Considering my courses, for example, I'm teaching academic writing, which is a 2-semester course at the department. This first year BA students course. So for the first semester, I assign the topics because I try to do it in a more controlled manner. However, when it comes to the second semester, this time I leave it to my students. Then they decide their own topics, which means that after practicing in-text citation skills in a controlled manner, then there becomes originality. I encourage them towards originality. However, bringing originality and practicing in-text citation skills at the same time might be difficult for the student, because at the same time we will be asking a lot from our students. Therefore, that's why I do this in different semesters. Considering the teacher assigned topics, what about students' familiarity with the topic? This is very important. If they don't have any background knowledge about the topic, then how do we ask them to write about it? And if they know nothing, what about the relevant sources? As the teacher, will you be providing some sources or list of sources, for example? Or do you ask them to go to the library or to search on the internet to find the relevant sources? Here comes another thing, the reliability of the sources, if they are to choose their own sources, how they avoid from predatory publishers, or what criteria they need to take into consideration in terms of identifying the credibility of the sources, reliability of the sources. These are some issues. Again, for control practices, for the first semester, I deliver the sources to my students because this is a control practice. Once they develop their skills, then for the next semester, they decide their topic. It means that they will be responsible to find reliable sources for their topic. So, to my experience, I believe that it is important not to ask everything at the same time. So we will be helping as instructors to our students to go step by step, gradually, to develop gradually. And what about the length of the assignment, the duration of the assignment, scaffolding, I mean peer feedback or teacher feedback provided? So these are the things that we should take into consideration, I guess. Once we check the literature, we see that in the process writing, it is expected to follow some basic common steps, for example, choosing the topic and then narrowing down the topic, brainstorming on it, visiting the library to find relevant sources, searching on the internet, preparing the outline, and then writing the drafts, submitting the drafts, exchanging peer feedback, proofreading, and then the final version. So what happens here? We, as the name suggests, we follow a process here, which is unique for the writing task. It means that we are paying attention to the process rather than the product itself. This is the basic discrimination. And to my understanding, what makes process writing mainly different from product writing is the opportunity of feedback. This is a very good opportunity, especially considering my situation. For example, every semester for about 150 students are taking my class. I have for about 150 BA students, and every fall semester, I deliver 3 writing assignments, 3 different topics. What does it mean? It means that there will be 450 submissions, 450 papers, which are accompanied by several drafts. So think about the workload as me as an instructor. I am not only teaching this BA class, I also have some other classes, some other responsibilities. So as a teacher, I need to find a way of encouraging my students to develop their papers. Because if I would be the only source of feedback, then this wouldn't work, especially in large classes. If I have 10 students, okay, I could provide feedback, timely feedback. However, if there are several students in large classes, then this will become complicated. Therefore, I develop a writing model in which I encourage my students to exchange peer feedback in a more controlled and more practical manner. Considering the relevant literature, we see that here I listed several related theories which might be associated with exchanging feedback. And the most important 2 things are coming from scaffolding and zone of proximal development, but it is also possible to associate it with the other learning theories. So there is good theoretical background behind peer feedback, I believe. But if you ask the students to exchange peer feedback in a traditional manner, I guarantee it won't work. Two problems that I identified. One of the problem, students will be misleading. Some students will be misleading each other. And we will talk about lack of trust here. Suppose, for example, Jarret and me. We are two students in the writing class, and the teacher matched two of us. Jarret is a very good student, whereas I am a poor student, poor writing skills. I am happy because Jarret, as a good student, will be providing feedback to me. So it means that I have trust in the feedback that is coming from Jarret. But what about Jarret? Jarret, probably you wouldn't be so happy to match with me because you will have questions regarding the quality of the feedback that I will be providing for your paper. So this is the first concern. What about the second one? If the teacher matches two of us, we are very close friends, and the teacher asks me to criticize my friend's paper. So, considering my social interaction with my friend, I might hesitate to do this. So, this is the other issue. Therefore, what did I do? Remember, I have 150 students each year, each semester. So what do I do? By considering my students' writing background and writing proficiency, I categorize my students into three groups: good students, poor students, and the ones in between. When it comes to peer matches, I do not match two students with each other. Instead, I work with one student. Okay, this is a paper coming from a student. Now I am going to match this paper with three students, one student coming from each group. So it means that every student will be receiving feedback from a student who is considered to be good in writing, who is considered to be moderate and poor in writing, which is quite similar to what happens when we submit an article to a journal, because we will be receiving feedback from several reviewers, and probably there will be contractions between the feedback of these reviewers. So it is going to be, as the author of the art manuscript, it is going to be our responsibility to decide what to do with this feedback. So here I encourage my students to decide what to do. They shouldn't automatically accept that the feedback is true. Now they should compare feedback to each other and check the accuracy, whether the student, the reviewer is suggesting something that should be acceptable or that should be avoided. This is, on the other hand, is contributing to their self-regulation skills. And also it is contributing to the students who are delivering feedback, because throughout the interview sessions, I revealed that many of my students are realizing their own mistakes when they are reading the others' papers. Okay, they find a mistake, or they see that, okay, it doesn't seem good here, but they later think that, okay, I did something in my paper, I guess. So they go back to their paper to revise it. Also, this is confirmed in the relevant literature. The relevant literature indicates that providing feedback contributes more to students rather than receiving feedback. So encouraging and planning peer feedback should be the priority in the process approach, and then asking students for revisions and then resubmitting the paper. It is to our chance that we can do this by using Turnitin. They have feedback studio, and they enable this feature. Some other text matching software, I guess, also such as Plexican also enable such features, but I haven't tried them yet. Okay, then now we are moving, after talking about teaching writing, we are moving to assessing writing, which will be the concern of Jarret this time. But before I leave it to Jarret, I'd like to remind you two things about the approaches in the assessment of writing: summative assessment and dynamic assessment. What happens in the summative assessment? The priority is given to the organization of ideas, mainly considering the syntactic and lexical knowledge. So the priority is on sub-skills, grammar and vocabulary here in the target language. This time, we'd like to analyze and see what happens in the whole process. Okay, then. Here, there is something that I borrowed from academic dishonesty and testing from Jarret's study, but I guess before we talk about academic dishonesty and testing, Jarret would like to give some more information about the testing procedure. Thank you, Jarret.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
I do.
Excellent. Thank you so very
Yes,
much.
we do.
And thank you for sharing this. So let's segue quickly. My background has been mostly in testing and assessment, and looking. And unfortunately, there was a typo, and that was completely my fault as I edited it early this morning. About 15 years of industry experience now, looking at credentialing and the certification programs, and it's all very fascinating. And let me say this as a bit of background, because what we often see is this very interesting like sine wave when I talk with colleagues working in and throughout the area that UNI covers, and looking at the United States, where we are so heavily focused on testing and assessment here that there is less that we see as far as academic integrity. In regards to plagiarism, it seems to be a little bit on the lower side, but academic integrity violations on the testing side really are quite high. And so that's what this study really focused on. We're very curious on the environment, right? We're looking at these testing centers where students go to take tests for their midterms, their finals, if the faculty member wants their quizzes to be assessed. And we really wanted to know what students felt about that and how those feelings translated into actual actions. So on the left, we had what was their attitude, right? So what did they think about taking a test in a proctored environment? And what we mean by that is actually having the faculty member send the test, or in any way send the writing assignment to a location, to a testing room on campus, and then you would have to check in. You would in many ways have to show your ID, and then you would sit down in an environment which was built to dissuade students from engaging in academic misconduct. And so what was their proctored attitude? And then what did that translate into actual behavior? Wanting to see if students felt a certain way and then followed up with actually acting that way, or if students felt a certain way and then they did not act in that way. And then we asked them to look at, well, what if it's unproctored, all right? And the major difference here is what is that communication then, and how is that being impactful to you? So if the faculty member is saying that this particular assessment, this assignment, what I'm asking you to do is so important that I'm going the extra step and asking you to go to a proctored environment, does that in fact change it if I communicate that it's not as important to you and I'm just going to let you do it at home? I don't care if you're colluding. I don't care if you're collaborating. I'm going to ask you not to, but my actions are not following through with that by saying that you can do it at home in an unproctored environment. So really our biggest takeaway, and these are some examples from the study. So looking here at a proctored environment, a proxy test taker, which in line would be like contract cheating, right? So paying somebody else to take a test for you. 97% of the students basically said, no, that's not appropriate. However, if we walk all the way over to the right, what we found very interesting that the most appropriate, the highest frequency is that cheat sheets or prior viewing of test content wasn't as impactful for them. Okay, so looking all the way down to unproctored environment, unproctored attitudes, it raised a little bit, but there's more information we can unpack on with the rest of the study. In essence, it boiled down to the fact that the communication during these tests from the institution down through the faculty member impacted student attitudes and student behaviors significantly, where the environment matters. And the environment matters so much, especially now when education is so transactional. There's a lot of research that's pointing in that direction, really saying that it's much more about get the degree so that I can move on, as opposed to the wealth of knowledge that I am obtaining while in the educational process. That this spoke volumes to us, but it reflected that attitude and the other literature that was out there. But specifically for us, because we're predominantly in the testing area, we wanted to see, like I said, particularly about how students reacted to these testing environments. Now, the takeaway for us and the other reflection also in the literature and talking about this tonight and why I wanted this to be included is that what we gained from this and what was clear from the respondents, we had like 4 different universities here, was that the communication was very clear. Now I'm going to step away from the research and look more at the takeaways and kind of how this is applicable in other areas, is that the communication throughout the entire process is so important right now, from the institution, through the dean's office, through the faculty members. And we see this in a lot of other areas when we talk about academic integrity, that if that is communicated well and holistically, then it really can be impactful to students and their belief about what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. If we just treat academic integrity as if it's something that has to be like a checkbox at the beginning of the year, then the voice falls flat, right? The message isn't quite there. So I wanted to stop here, A, and ask if we have any questions, but B, I'd like, if it's okay, can we ask the students if they have begun to see any increase, because I know all of you are teachers, and so in your own professions, are you seeing anecdotally, or if you've been tracking, that academic integrity infractions or plagiarism has increased since the beginning of the pandemic?
Surprisingly, not at all.
That is surprising, and that is fantastic to hear.
But I would like to highlight our context. We teach. We are instructors in an English preparatory program, which preps the students for their academic studies in their departments where medium is partially in English. but only like 20 or 30% of our students are obliged to take this preparatory program, whereas others take it voluntarily. So they are motivated learners and they choose to come to our program deliberately to improve their English skills for several obvious reasons. First of all, they were concerned with the university entrance exam for long years, and so English was not their primary concern. The second one is it is free. It is a course that is for free. It's a great opportunity for them to do it for free and to take a breath, a deep breath before going on with their departmental studies. So even though we had high concerns before running the proficiency exams before starting the academic year and before doing the placement tests, surprisingly, the statistics revealed a very similar pattern in the success ratios and in the distribution of students throughout the levels as to previous years. And this was shocking for us, because we didn't expectation. And it was very similar because the director of the studies, the director of the School of Foreign Languages is a part of the group community in WhatsApp with the other directors, and most of the School of Foreign Languages shared similar statistics, similar patterns. So I think it has to do with the context. It has to do with the fact that the students are doing this in a motivated way. They still want to make a gain in terms of improving their English proficiency in this year of, of turbulent times, let's say, and do something useful for themselves rather than get into the stress and the pressure of moving on with their department, with their studies in their departments. And during this teaching period of 6 weeks, we have realized that because the assessment obviously changed, the type of assessment, and we prioritize now more of a formative assessment and multimodal assignments rather than end-of-year tests, the students have not cheated at all. No one has declared that, hey, you know what, I have, plagiarized texts or plagiarized assignments in my class. No one has done so. It's more about, building a community, a strong community. This is our concerns with students, where students to remind them, because they tend to forget. This is our problem with distance education. We are forgetting, we are not on track of things, on top of things. So we need a strong community that kind of keeps reminding and keeps nurturing students' needs and, offering students support at all times through these tools that we use, like WhatsApp and discussion forums and the LMS and so on.
Thank you, Miranda. Yes, is it Hatice? I see your golden hand, but I believe you're on mute. There you go.
It's Hatice. Hello?
Yes, please.
I'm not very knowledgeable about our testing progress right now. It is the administrator who knows better about that. But what I can say about the assignments I give students personally, I can see that the way they take those assignments seriously, I think, has changed. It's not the same, because when we were doing it face to face, they knew that they had an opinion about my attitudes. But now it's not the same, because these are, again, my prep class students and they haven't seen me yet. And they do not know me at all. They haven't seen me face to face. And I think that has changed their attitude, because they do not take it seriously. Of course, there are students who tries to keep in contact, emailing me, asking questions about how to do, what to do. These students aside, I think there is a problem with the way they are not taking seriously. as they did when we were doing it face to face. I think that's one problem with the assignments, not the assessment though. I don't know much about that.
Thank you.
Jarret, this increases my concerns related to this course because I haven't met some of my students face to face yet, including Hatice. So does this mean that you won't take your assignment seriously? Is there any implied meaning?
How do you know that she's not a twin and they're just doing it together, Salim? The world is. Hatice, you don't have a twin, do you?
It's not the first impression I gave you, Hocam. Because I've never been that kind of student.
Okay, just kidding, of course. Good to hear about students' perspectives. I wonder whether there are any schools, any universities in Turkey which is benefiting from proctoring systems.
Well, I am informed that certain private universities in Istanbul are benefiting from proctoring systems. I know some of them in person. I've contacted them and I've gotten their opinion. And they are very happy with those.
Indeed, some universities in Istanbul, some private universities in Istanbul,
yes,
were using proctoring systems even before the pandemic. So they maintained this during the pandemic, but I guess no state school, no state university is using proctoring systems.
Well, as you know, we have an even more restricted budget these days. You know, there has been a tendency towards restricting the budget of universities throughout the past 2 years, especially. But now with the pandemic, our budget is even more restricted, and we cannot afford it.
So can I ask, because this is a great interest to me, and really the meat of what I do so often. So then for those courses, those faculty that had been prepared, say last fall, to roll right into their spring, and they had assessments prepared that they could now no longer deliver because they were not seeing them, were they forced immediately to come up with an alternative assignment? Are they trying to deliver them unproctored? What does that landscape look like?
Talking out of my experience again, it's probably very particular, but we had critical meetings, a series of meetings with coordinators, with core team members, let's say, where we first discussed the opportunities we had ahead, like changing the assessment flow, changing the type of exams, and we went for the more practical one. We said, okay, we cannot introduce now all of a sudden new assignments and new things, but let's keep our exam the way it is, but adapt it for the distance education. So we made, but it wasn't only adapting it, it was like more changing and writing out of. So the testing teams worked very hard, like it was a non-stop work, like 7/24 work for like at least 2 weeks, as far as I remember, like 2 weeks minimum. And then in the end, we had trial sessions with teachers, and we recognized the flaws. We kind of invented our proctoring system. We asked, teachers to get connected with 2 devices, and to proctor them. And then we saw that it works well. And unless, students won't have 2 devices, so we wrote a very detailed procedures for the students. So as I say, it was a very hard and meticulous work. And then we designed our own testing system, out of the scratch, and we ran it. So this is what happened.
I'm applauding you. That's
I
a lot
join
of
you.
excellent work. And in many ways, I don't want to continue this because I know we have more slides to do, but I do feel like that is what a lot of us ended up doing. I mean, we ended up having to do the same. We actually engaged with a remote proctoring system, and two things happened. One, excuse me, faculty really run our institution, not our administrators, and so the faculty rejected the third party, but they liked what we could do in-house, which was very similar, Miranda, with what you're doing. And I think we're on track to do like 15,000 exams by December. So, I mean, it's been quite a heavy lift. So, but I know we have a lot more slides to go, so I'll stop there about talking about my favorite topic, and we'll keep talking about my second favorite topic. All right, please.
In the next slide, we will also be referring to some students' open responses.
Oh, yes.
From your study again. This time, we'd like to see how learning and testing they are interacted. So what would you like to say about this, Jarret?
Let me just highlight a couple, and I think it's really telling. You know, it was a little bit more anecdotal, right? But we wanted to hear it from, we have an expression from the horse's mouth, right? So to hear it right from the students after they had already responded to our survey. And a number of students were very open with the fact, again, re-highlighting what the literature said about students now looking more at this as a transactional educational experience. I go, I pay my money, and I want a degree. And if I don't get that degree, then A, I'm going to be surprised, a little miffed, but B, you as the faculty member are in charge of figuring that out for me, right? And if I come to class, then I shouldn't be. So all these pain points, as we were talking about the process writing, and these things that they are required to do, it starts looking like here's this mountain that you need to go up, whereas I could just engage with someone for money, which fascinates me. It doesn't seem to be as important as it was in the past, but I can just pay someone to write my essay, and that'll be much less painful for me than actually going through the process and learning how to write myself. We're seeing this more frequently than I would like to admit with students at our own university, where even the steps in the process they're paying someone else to do for them. And it's very frustrating. So right here in the middle, and I don't have, I think about 4 down, it says, when one has the opportunity to advance their standing, one takes it. It's cliche to say that everyone else is doing it, but this cliche is in fact truth. When your direct competitor and peers take advantage, you really have to do the same to keep up. But I also think it's very important, obviously, context, right? So at this point, I wanted to wait, but I wanted to back up after some of the comments, especially with what Miranda had said, to now look at what students were engaging with, if you have multiple classes, right? Those students that here, you know, if this is an elective, obviously they're going to be much more engaged. This particular survey was done with first and second year university engineering students whose primary goal was to finish their BA because they had to get into the MA. The BA impacted the MA, so the BA became very transactional, right? They just had to get a good grade so they could get into the right program to continue on. So we found that this particular audience was much more about that transactional nature, but also highly impacted by that communication and by what the institution is then stating is appropriate, not appropriate. If we put your test in a proctored environment, now with the pandemic, we didn't look at the remote proctoring, but that would be an area of additional study. But a testing center, a proctored environment which somebody is monitoring to make sure that you're doing it honestly, that was seen as more important than if the faculty member had said, no, you can go ahead and take it at home. I don't think I'll pull anything else off of here. We can read them maybe at a later date.
Oh, thank you, Jarret, for the clarification. This shows the importance of having pedagogical approach and understanding motivational aspects behind academic misconduct, especially their situation, their mood might be changing during this pandemic. This is also another important consideration, and how students regard themselves. Do they consider themselves as students or customers? Especially valid for private universities, so they'll be acting more like customers rather than students, I guess. So
that's a very good point, Hocam. The moment they see themselves like customers, all their behaviors change. It's more about, you know, getting the service done for the lowest cost possible.
So
and actually, I'd like to maybe clarify that, and I'd see, Miranda, if this resonates with you, because we have seen cost more of that internal motivational and pain point, right? So cost could be taking me away from my Xbox for an hour so I can follow the process and the writing procedure, right? Because that is actually more painful for me than spending $100 US to pay somebody else to write this for me. And what surprised us through this, and what's kind of surprised us just now switching, not through this story, but on the academic integrity side, is that we're a two-year university. And so cost is, we had always thought, a significant factor because we're relatively low cost. And then we're, you know, the cost saving before they go to the four-year university. But that wasn't the case. Students were more willing to pay what I consider to be very high amounts for a proxy tester, for a collaborator to come in and do the work for them, than to do this little amount of work. So it's fascinating, but it's important to remember what the cost is in the eyes of these students, and it changes class to class.
Okay, thank you for clarification. Considering the assessment aspect, I'd like to call your attention to use of rubrics. Okay, we use rubrics. It is good to have an institutional rubric, and I know with that, for example, at Miranda Hocam, for example, at Bursa Technical University, they have developed their own institutional rubrics to assess different language skills. So this is good because the instructors or the testers who will be scoring student assignments should work on the rubric that they will be using. This is a very good point. But my understanding of rubric is I consider it as a pedagogical tool, not only to score but also to deliver feedback. For example, at the very beginning of the semester, I share my rubric with my students so that they know what criteria I pay attention. And when I ask them to exchange peer feedback, they use this rubric, the items existing in this rubric, in order to provide feedback to each other. So in one way, their feedback exchange is encouraged by testing practices. And considering our department, we are training English language teachers here, EFL teachers here, which means that they will be scoring student assignments when they graduate. So in a way, providing feedback will be preparing them, testing, scoring student assignments in the real life. So considering our department, this also contributes from another perspective here. In my class, what I said, I match students with 3 papers: good student, poor student, and the student in moderate. And considering this, it is good to understand the capabilities of students. For example, here, 3 feedback coming from students. You see student 1, student 2, student 3. Student 1 here provided additional comments on the text, highlighted, called attention to several other features. Probably this is coming from a good student. Now, to show this better to you, I'd like to illustrate where a student's final writing score for the course is coming from. So I take several issues. We said that this is process writing, and I take several issues into consideration. This is the student's portfolio, for example, throughout the semester. First, the student submits the outline, and then the student includes in-text citations and reference lists, so shows which sources will be available to support which idea, and then writes the drafts, exchange drafts, and then exchange peer feedback. So I keep records of this throughout the semester. When it comes to assessment, I check every student individually. I'm not focusing on the final product, but I like to see what the student has achieved throughout the semester here. Therefore, in order to understand whether the student has cooperated with any essay meals or involved in any collision activity, this helps me a lot because I am not simply focusing on a single product here. I'd like to see all pictures. Okay, what feedback did the student provide to the peer? Or what feedback another peer? And what was her response to that feedback? What did she correct? And what about her capabilities? So if there are any suspicions, for example, I ask them to send me the reference list. And at the end of the semester, I also ask my students to upload any PDF that they benefited to write their assignments. For example, if they are citing a source, if it is not a secondary source, then they need to submit the PDF, complete PDF for this source in order to ensure me that, okay, I read it, and here's my understanding, my paraphrase expression, blah, blah. So there will be some additional precautions against contract cheating and collision. Here, when it comes to score, I do not merely focus on students' written assignment. I also analyze the feedback that they provide to the other students. They are sparing their time to deliver feedback. So, to my understanding as a teacher, I need to appreciate their efforts in providing feedback. Therefore, I make this as a component of the scoring procedure. This is the rubric that I developed. There are 50 items that I take into consideration, and I ask my students to provide feedback by considering the 50 items that are available here. It doesn't necessarily mean that, for example, grammar. They don't need to correct any grammatical mistake, or they don't need to highlight any grammatical mistakes. However, if there are regular mistakes, systematic errors, I mean, for example, you don't pay attention to subject-verb agreement. Here is the example. Please pay attention to this. So I expect my student to provide such feedback, and at least with one example when they deliver, when they exchange peer feedback. Here you see how the assignment procedure works for any student. They will be submitting several assignments so that I can score them. I also ask my students to provide self-feedback to their papers by taking my rubric into consideration. Suppose if you are the teacher, what do you think about the unity of your paper? Flow of ideas of your paper. Sometimes students indicate that, okay, I know that I didn't do very well when it comes to using linking devices. So it is poor. I know that it is poor in my paper. I couldn't develop it because of, for example, time pressure, or because of my lack of proficiency in the target language. So it's good to learn about their excuses for any failures. It is good to know the differences. For example, you see feedback provided by good learners, good writers. However, when it comes to moderate ones, you see less interactions with the text. Or when it comes to poor ones or weak ones, then almost no interaction with the text. That's what I claim with the incompetencies of weak learners providing feedback to the good ones. Therefore, we need an asymmetrical distribution of feedback. Otherwise, it is impossible to provide symmetrical feedback distribution in the classes. When it comes to assessment, students will be submitting a written paper, so this will be contributing to 60% to their final score. What about the rest 40? It will be coming from the feedback. It is possible to include self-feedback, or it is simply possible to do it with reference to peer feedback. I score the quality of the peer feedback that they provide to their peers. So this will be another indicator of the testing here. It doesn't merely depend on their written paper. I find it, of course, it is time consuming for me, but I find it more valuable in terms of understanding the complete process for the teachers. Now, before I conclude to this, I'd like to refer to once again to Hamplian's and the keynote speech that was delivered. Again, Jarret, it is similar perspective here. In your study, in your article, you also try to show the connection between learning and testing. And here, Hamplian's also calls attention to assessing writing and teaching writing. There will be several constructs related to each other here. For example, when it is related to teaching writing, we should have several questions related to who is teaching, what is being taught, when, where, why, and how. And when it comes to assessing writing, what, when, where, these questions, in addition to how and why, will become an important component. And feedback will be acting like a bridge between teaching writing and assessing writing. This will be a very important consideration to my understanding. Okay, I'd like to learn more about your understanding, because you are the expert here, Jarret, about it. What would you like to add, please?
Yes, thank you. I don't know why you put me after a keynote speech, but I appreciate the. It was really good. I'd like to know. I'd like to go back and actually take a look at that keynote speech. So I don't know off the top of my head, if, to be honest, if there's anything else that I would add to this particular section. But I think I might in a little bit more. What I would say, and it gets complicated again, looking at the context and looking at the audience for which we are looking. I loved in the previous slides how you have used that feedback loop, looking at a good, a moderate, and maybe a little bit lower in that feedback in the middle, to take your teaching writing and the academic side within the classroom and providing them with that feedback. But so one of the things, if I may, and I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction here. Looking at the rubric, do you find that the adoption of the rubric across the entire institution goes in waves? And I'm asking that from my own, and this is kind of an issue that we have had, and so that's why looking at the rubric and having the 3 different pieces, what we had found is that we had an institutional rubric, and even though the faculty were trained quite well, faculty A and B were coming out with, frankly, a completely different scenario with A and B, but C, D, and E were getting a completely different grade. And so our institution ended up having to go with a nationally normed kind of assessment for looking at assessing students' writing. And now we're about 10 years into that, and there's pushback onto that national assessment, and we're looking at maybe recreating a rubric. So we're going in this panel where we're going from an institutionally created device to a nationally created device, looking maybe going back at an institutionally created device. And my question to you in looking at this is how, and I know we've talked about this before, how have you been so successful in not having that faculty, the training across the board, and not having different outcomes using the same rubric as perhaps that we have? And I know that you had some great thoughts on that before, so I'm asking again the question because I know we're a couple of years after that.
Okay, thank you, Jarret. Considering my rubric, this is a rubric I specifically developed for academic writing, to assess academic writing. And when I was developing this rubric, I took my course content into consideration, and I benefited from multi-trait, multi-method metrics in order to ensure construct validity. I mean, how it is discriminating from the other existing rubrics. So I ensured this, but I cannot guarantee that it could function as a good institutional rubric, because it is related to my teaching aims. What I'd like to imply here is that the rubric that the institution is using should be directly related to their course content and their teaching aims. For example, I am giving priority to how to implement secondary sources, and there are items to identify secondary sources, reliability of secondary sources. So if the course is not covering this issue, then it wouldn't be fair from the perspective of students. It wouldn't be fair to assess them by taking this into consideration. Well, of course, it is possible to make some arrangements, but I would suggest instructors or institutions or departments to use their own rubrics. For example, let's say Hatice Hocam wants to use my rubric at their own department. They could try to use it as it is available, or alternatively, they can work on it as the instructors who will be using this rubric, and then make necessary arrangements. And another important thing, what about inter-rater reliability, especially if we are talking about assessment of writing here? What about inter-rater reliability? This is very important. So rater training by using the rubric will be functioning as another important component here. Raters should be very familiar about the items in the rubric, and there are 3 discriminators in my rubric. For each item, it could either be accepted as weak, moderate, or good, so, acceptable. I mean, if it is weak, the student receives 0 point. If it is good, the student receives 2 points. If it is acceptable in the middle, then the student receives 1 point. Not having many descriptors will contribute to establishing inter-rater reliability, especially if there are several raters assigning scores to student assignments. My suggestion in the development of the rubric will be having less discriminators, more items. There are 50 items in my rubric, but less discriminators. This will increase inter-rater reliability to my experience. I hope this helps.
No, that was excellent. And that was one of the biggest issues that we had, was that inter-rater reliability was actually frankly off the charts. And so it was great to hear. I think, Miranda, do you have a question?
No, it's not a question. It's just, you know, backing up what Professor Salim Hoca said just a second ago. So in the Turkish context, I think there is autonomy provided by the Higher National Council. So the autonomy comes to down to the institutions, and within the institutions, again, there are two main channeled contexts. There is one, the more restricted context, which is in the preparatory programs, and the more independent context, which is in the terms of courses by the faculty. As Salim Hoca said, you know, it depends on the type of the course, and it depends on the design of the course, and the rubrics will belong to the course and to the that will be initiated by the professor. But when it comes to prep programs, which is our context, we are in a more controlled situation. So it comes we are an institution within an institution. And in this little institution we need inter-rater reliability becomes a crucial component, because the rubrics apply to many instructors. So they need to be, and so in these contexts, again, there are two mainstream approaches. These little institutions either adopt rubrics from the outside or devise their own rubrics. In my institution, we devise our own, and it's a team. It's not only one teacher, but teams of teachers come together and devise this rubric. But obviously, we cannot include all teachers. If we have like 40 instructors being a member of the whole team, then only 4 or 5 of them will be devising the rubric for the concerns of practicality and reliability. And then rater trainings become, again, another very important element. But despite doing all these, despite devising our own rubrics, despite having regular rater trainings, despite having, you know, comparisons and analyzing the attitudes of the raters across the board, we still have differences, and I think it's inevitable. It's something that we need to be aware of, and we need to keep an open eye on this. But it has to be with, I think it's more related to the individual beliefs of the instructors and behavior.
Thank you, Miranda Hocam. Okay, now we are approaching to our concluding remarks. Okay, we talk about plagiarism, and we talk about a pedagogical approach plagiarism. It means that we shouldn't consider plagiarism only as an ethical issue, or limited with ethical issues. And in our policies, in our academic integrity policies, of course, we will be addressing how to detect plagiarism, or about the sanctions, about our reactions. But we should give priority to preventive approaches. I mean, some strategies, as told, some strategies to prevent students from academic misconduct and to promote them to academic integrity. We refer to several sources here, so I try to provide a bibliography this time rather than a reference list, so there will be several other related sources available here. Okay, I'd like to leave the final word to Jarret, who was very kind to join us. I guess it is about 2 a.m. for him, right? Yeah, almost a.m.
How am I doing? Am I starting to?
Yeah. So sorry,
No.
Jarret, for asking you to join at that strange time. And we are very happy to welcome you here. And it was a very fruitful session for all of us. We would like to thank you for being us here.
Well, thank you again. Thank you very much, and I'm glad to do actually a joke that I spend stranger hours since the pandemic has begun talking to dear friends and colleagues across the globe than I ever would have before the pandemic allowed. So this is quite good. I wanted to follow up. You know, you had mentioned in the last slide to make sure that academic integrity and plagiarism, not just an ethical issue. And I think that's really the core of it, right? We are educators. At the heart of it, at the end of the day, we are educators. And so what we find so often now is that depending on the intent, depending on, again, going back to technology and what the integration of technology has been for the student, what the cultural background, it's, you know, even within, as you said, L2 learners, that cultural context is quite significant, that there just is so much that students bring to the table that it's important at the end of the day to use all of these tools to prolong that academic, that educational conversation and not always have it to be a punitive question. So again, I wanted to thank all of you, and I wanted to ask if there were any questions for me before we go off, or any in particular. Miranda, I did see your hand, but I think that might have just been a carryover from before.
Yeah, it was a carryover from before. I just realized it.
Okay. Did anyone have any closing questions for me before we go?
So all people seem so satisfied.
Well,
Yeah.
Stunned into silence, perhaps.
One of the most privileged communities in Turkey, even in the world, you know, to be able to have discussions with these valuable people, you know, that have done so much in terms of academic integrity. Thank you.
That's very, very kind words, Miranda. I'm sorry. I think my camera, my internet connection went down a little bit, but it sounded very nice. So thank you very much, Miranda, for that. Atis, did you have a question?
First of all, I want to thank you. It was very informing. More than writing, I'm in the speaking and listening skills in my teaching. So that's what I do. I was just thinking as you spoke how to provide integrated reliability issues. So I was thinking if it would be possible to apply all these into assessing speaking. And so I think I had some ideas, so I want to thank you, but maybe you can have some suggestions, as you know, you're good with, you're professional in testing. So maybe I can hear your ideas about that as well.
So bringing the same type of rubric forward into both speaking would it? I think yes. as we, I think, had just discussed, probably the biggest concern is then looking at the course material itself and how that training is going to look. It would be a large undertaking. I think, Salim, as you had mentioned, it was a number of years to develop your rubric for your particular course content, and then to vet it and to make sure that it was appropriate and to do the appropriate research afterwards. I don't know that I have personally seen a rubric just for speaking. In one of the reasons and one of the things that we have moved so far with, and why I'm being somewhat evasive on this, is that we did have issues with that the reliability factor of the different readers, and so we really have moved heavier into the reliance of artificial intelligence, using artificial intelligence in those specifically in those particular areas. Faculty have been more seduced, actually, is probably the most inappropriate but appropriate word, by the technology and looking at that. And so it may or may not be the right way to go. The artificial intelligence, unfortunately, got initially quite expensive. We didn't pay for it, but when it was originally brought to us by a national company we use, and from there, and this is the back end, right, this up and down, because we moved away from an institutional created to a nationally created, really internationally created artificial intelligence product that after 7 years of using, now our faculty are now started looking back that they're not as happy with it. A lot of this pushback on larger programs, and are now looking to recreate more local rubrics. Salim, did you want to add anything to that, or did anyone else, about using this type of same approach in those areas?
Yeah, since speaking and writing, both of them are productive skills, of course, the approaches might be transferable. However, the problem with the testing of speaking is in the relevant literature, there is less much available. So that is the problem. For example, once you check the literature, there will be many sources available in assessing writing, but unfortunately not when it comes to speaking. One of my PhD students studied assessing writing from Bursa Technical University, and now another student from Bursa Technical University is studying assessing speaking, and hopefully Mustafa Çoban, his thesis, which will be available next semester, hopefully his findings will help us understand the dimensions involved in testing speaking better, because he's really doing well with his thesis. Okay.
Forward to it, Hocam, because yes, we have rubrics. When it comes to speaking, you know, it needs to be some sort of immediate assessment, because you need to assess students as they speak. So when I considered about having too many items in the rubric, it didn't really sound practical. So that was one issue I considered. Of course, rubrics are the only thing that came to my mind to have some kind of objectivity, but I just wanted to hear your opinions, of course. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all. I guess we need to allow Jarret to go to bed. Yeah. Okay.
I'll be up for a little while now here.
I am stopping the recording.